Hello, and welcome to the American Council on Exercise live webinars continuing education series. My name is Jackie Crockford, and I will be your host for today's live event. Before we get started with today's live webinar, let's go over a few logistics so that you can have a great learning experience today. You are watching today for free via YouTube, so once again, thank you for taking the time to enjoy this presentation with us. Take a look at your YouTube chat bar and be sure to utilize that throughout today's presentation. You can type in any questions for our presenter, should those come up for you, and you can type in any questions for me if you're having any technical difficulties or have questions about ACE, and I'll be monitoring those throughout today's presentation. And we'll take a few of your live questions for our presenter at the end of today's live webinar. Also, remember that because you are watching today for free, no continuing education credits are awarded, but you can earn your CECs from today's course by using the link provided on your screen after today's webinar is complete. So that's acefitness.org/past webinars, and we'll go over how to purchase the recorded version of today's course along with the included PDFs for download at the end of today's presentation. Okay, if you're ready for today's live event, let's get started. Welcome to your course, Exercise Programming, Muscular Training, and the ACE Integrated Fitness Training Model. My name is Jackie Crockford, and I will be your host for today's presentation, and joining me today is our presenter, Michelle Leachman. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So Michelle is an employee at the American Council on Exercise. Michelle, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about how you got to where you are here in just a moment, but today we're going to be talking about the muscular training component of the ACE IFT model. So tell us a little bit about why muscular training and strength training is such a passionate topic for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to present on this, mainly because I incorporate muscular training into all of my exercise routines. I formerly was an obstacle course racer and unfortunately experienced a shoulder injury. With that came 3 shoulder reconstruction surgeries, and through all of this, muscular training has been something that I've been able to incorporate to get back to a really solid athletic ability to still achieve things while still potentially kind of being in recovery.
Wonderful. So we're going to be hearing a lot about that today. I know you're going to share a couple little stories about your obstacle course racing and clients as well throughout today's presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. I am so excited to be here in studio nonetheless. That being said, like Jackie mentioned, I am with the American Council on Exercise. I oversee the professional education department. Throughout my time, I've been a certified personal trainer with ACE since 2010, so it's definitely been a minute. With that, I've been able to utilize my skills and my degrees teaching as a fitness director on board of a cruise ship. Not too bad, got to travel around the Hawaiian Islands, and then continue to further that into working in academia, teaching anatomy, biomechanics, physical education at Utah State University. Further led me to California at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where I went back into fitness, and eventually all of these different stepping stones, amongst a whole bunch of things in between, led me to my position now with ACE, and I couldn't be more enthusiastic about all that I do. That being said, I also still get to move a lot on the side as I am a master trainer for core health and fitness and still teach a variety of cycle classes, yoga, high intensity training, you name it. I was kind of like a medal seeker in obstacle course races and also a certification seeker for a long time. That being said, I'm really excited to be able to be here and essentially talk about everything that I like to live by. That being said, I hashtag this quite often, but do what you love what you do. I like to lead by example in constantly moving the body. With that, ACE's mission is also to get people moving. That's what the body's designed for. So I'm really excited to take you through this muscular component today because we're gonna hone in all of getting that body moving, right? So throughout today's webinar, we're going to cover many different topics, and there's a lot of information in this hour that I'm here with you. So make sure to reference anything that you need, take notes. We're going to cover 4 different course objectives. The first is going to be how to leverage the muscular phases of that IFT muscular training component, how to safely move a client from one phase into the next by progressing from functional, movement, load, and speed. We're going to learn how to understand how to apply this long-term muscular training component phases throughout all of our clients that we work with and relate them to their goals. Finally, we're going to apply 3 separate training plans using the ACE IFT muscular training component. All of this is going to be real-world application, and I hope that you can take a lot of this away and be able to utilize this immediately with all of your clients. To begin with that idea and that notion of getting people moving, the ACE Integrated Fitness Training Model is a systematic design of exercise programming that is designed to get the body to move, the abilities within the body, right? The ACE IFT was designed for personal trainers as a systematic and comprehensive approach towards learning that adherence, working to learn and understand a client's behavior change, and that rapport building, while also improving things like posture, stability, flexibility, mobility, cardiorespiratory, muscular strength, and muscular endurance. So many things that it encompasses. Our President, Chief Science Officer, Dr. Cedric Bryant, refers to the muscles as the engines of the body, right? They're what produces force. So if you were to take a client who is brand new to exercise, and let's say they look in the mirror and they see all their muscles and they're really looking at their abdominals, what would be their six-pack muscles? Right, we know this as our rectus abdominis, that paired muscle that lines the abdominal wall, and it's responsible for so many important things, like lumbar support, our breathing, big exertion with our respiratory system that we definitely use while exercising, as well as childbirth, so many different things. But if you take this client who's brand new to exercise, and they want to strengthen, sculpt, tone, for lack of a better word, that six-pack area, what do we commonly see them refer to as the first go-to exercise, right? Crunches, this crunching motion over and over and over, that can have long-term disadvantages, right? We talk about that spine, that lumbar support. If you constantly have a client engaging in that action and that action only, they're not really going to see much benefit. We know as personal trainers, and we have to educate that it's very important to train the opposing muscles and all of the minor muscles, right? Not only the major muscles. So something, if we were to take this example and continue with it, we'd want to educate that client on working other opposing muscles, other exercise incorporations, right? So we could talk about lifting the knee. Lifting that knee up creates flexion of the trunk. We create a longer lengthening range of motion. We could incorporate a whole variety of our plank exercises. Bird dog, glute bridges, there's so many different exercises, actually a lot of which you'll see in the PDF workouts that we've designed that come with the course if you choose to purchase the webinar after we're done today. In addition, we want to be able to teach the 5 primary movement patterns, which we'll see throughout the phases of the ACE IFT model, but that's something that we really have to educate our clients on. With the integrated fitness training model, the muscular component, it's really important to be able to advocate the benefits of muscular training to our clients. With that, we have to get to know our clients. To start, we utilize what's called the ACE Mover method. The ACE Mover method is a client-centered approach to personal training that empowers the client to make healthy lifestyle behavior changes. It's our job as personal trainers, as exercise professionals in this industry, to listen to our clients, to understand, to let them know that they are heard. I cannot stress the empathy component enough, but that we have to take this method of listening and understanding to develop that mutual trust, right? That's the key. We have to be able to develop that mutual trust between you as the client, or you as the personal trainer with your client. So to begin, we've divided the ACE Mover method into 3 very memorable ABC, right? ABC. So to begin, we'd want to start with asking open-ended questions. When you ask these open-ended questions, it's giving you an opportunity to learn your client's values, perceptions, what maybe motivates them, what they just want to talk about and get out of this time that they're spending with you. This is your time to understand their readiness to change. Why did they choose this week, this time to be with you? We've all been impacted greatly by the pandemic this past year that I'm sure none of us really thought was going to happen like it did. And so why now are they ready to change and be with you? Finally, with asking open-ended questions, this is a great opportunity for you to identify their motivation, right? Know and understand what their goals are, which takes us into the next one, which is breaking down barriers. When we break down barriers, we want to be looking for exploring perceived obstacles. Again, reference to this pandemic. Was that an obstacle that prevented them from achieving their exercise goals or creating healthy behavior habits during this past year? How has that affected them? And additionally, understanding those past and present circumstances that may affect their exercise programming, that may affect their goals. With this, work together to develop different ways in which you can reach and succeed at their goals. Finally, collaborate. I'm a talker. I love working with my classes and my clients. I love communication. Collaborate with your client. Find ways in which you make them feel like the expert, right? Listen to what they enjoy. Were they a former athlete in high school? Did they play on city leagues before everything kind of got slowed down for a while? What do they enjoy doing? What exercises do they know and can progress on, right? Find ways in which they are the expert. Also, work on their goal setting, and through all of this, you'll be able to design their programs specific to meet their needs. This mutual trust, this client-centered approach, is absolutely a must when you're working with every single client to help them achieve their goals. So with this in mind, bringing us to the benefits of muscular training, as everything is intertwined throughout today's webinar. The benefits of muscular training, when we think about somebody exercising, some people might be afraid to work out when they want to, muscular train. We don't see that as often. We see somebody hop on a treadmill, do something that they think is common or might know, but there's so many benefits to muscular training that might not be known to our average client. For example, by engaging in muscular training, our bodies can better self-regulate our heart rate, our blood pressure, control of insulin. You think about that glycogen moving throughout the body. All of this is a benefit of muscular training, right? In addition, if we talk about different things that people might not know, let's say you're driving along the road and we see those stickers on the back of cars all the time, right? I never thought I'd be a person with those stickers. I'm that person. That being said, I don't have this one, even though I love it. If you see that sticker where the person's hands are up and there's a big poop emoji and it says, "I pooped today!" ! You kind of laugh at it. But that's a thing, right? IBS, digestion, all of these different things really kind of bog down a person's day. That being said, that's a benefit of muscular training that people don't often think about. If somebody is having some issues in their digestive area, they think of incorporating some more water, upping their fiber intake, right? But think about it this way. If you were to propose this to your clients, when you engage your body in more muscular training, let's talk about strengthening in that rectus abdominis area. When you create that strong foundation, strengthen and increase those muscles, that aids in more blood flow, oxygen, stronger core. That all aids in the digestive tract. So that's a win in itself. In addition to that idea of blood flow, oxygen, that all benefits so many different organs that also aid in improved immunity, right? You're improving your immune support by engaging in muscular training. In addition, some things that aren't commonly talked about, but when we talk about muscular training, we're strengthening, sculpting the body in a way. We feel more powerful in our own well-being, right? That being said, it has significant benefits in mental health, and that's something that is very, very important. It always has been, but especially now more than ever. Mental health, very important. And if we take that concept just a little bit further, talk about sex lives, right? That's going to improve with muscular training as well. So that's an added benefit, right? You got me talking on camera about poop and sex. Like, this is the webinar to attend. That being said, muscular training has so many different benefits. 3 you're going to see appear on your screen are very important. These are common, but they need to be educated to our clients in addition to everything else that comes with the benefits. The first, increased physical capacity. Physical capacity is the ability to perform work or exercise. With muscular training, we increase our muscular strength and we increase the capacity to produce force, right? So if we take that as a combination, increased strength, increased force, we're able to go through our day-to-day motions and move through each of these functions with a little more ease, right? Who wants to be so stressed to have to get something down on a high shelf or in their garage? When we increase our physical capacity, we can do more of these tasks with less effort, right? We've developed that strength. In addition, increasing our physical capacity, if we talk about the body's center of gravity, the body's center of gravity actually increases. You have a better understanding and foundation when you engage in muscular strength training, right? In addition, we increase that range of motion, all things that aid in the activities of daily living. The next is enhanced metabolic function. So our metabolism decreases with age. We know that. And with that theory in mind, a lot of people assume that decreasing metabolism is inevitable. That's just not the case. When we engage in muscular training, it actually raises our resting metabolic rate, our RMR. With that, that means when you're at home or your clients are at home performing, maybe they work from home, at a desk, right? They're actually, when they build more muscular strength, they're burning more calories at rest. That is so important. When we talk about the metabolism, we see that it declines per decade by about 3 to 8%. That's huge. With that, we lose about 5 pounds of muscle mass every decade. So we have to combat that. So when we talk about our mission of getting people moving, we have to keep people moving to combat this, right? It's incredibly important. And when we're talking about our enhanced metabolic function, increasing our muscle mass decreases our fat mass. Increasing the metabolism decreases some of our weight gain and overall better control weight management. Very, very important. The next one, which I'm a firm believer should be intertwined into every single exercise program that you build for someone. Whether you're working maybe with a family member, a friend, that doesn't matter. Risk assessment should always be the main goal that you're looking at when trying to get somebody to reach their overall fitness goals. So when you increase your muscular training and you build this into your regular exercise regimen, what we see is reduced injury risk and disease prevention. We know now, based on so much evidence, that engaging in muscular training actually decreases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. With that, when we're working with our clients, it's important to note their form and technique. Really pay attention to those things. I'll talk about my experiences just a little bit further along, but we want to work with our athletes, our older adults, our regular exercises, our brand new exercises, everybody. We want to be able to work with them to reduce their injury risk by assessing their form, their technique. When you're working with your older clients, focus on that balance aspect as well, right? Balance is a combination essentially of your force, your power combined, and it's the muscle's ability to respond and adapt quickly. Fall prevention, right? Uneven surfaces, possibly getting bumped into. We really want to be able to add the benefit, and you get that from muscular training, building that into your clients' programs. So with all of this information that you're learning today, it's your duty as an exercise professional to educate this information to your clients. Show the power and the impact that muscular training holds. It's a pretty great thing. Physiological adaptations. So we have a lot of things that take place in the body, and this happens when the bodies start to adapt to some type of stress. Now, I'm going to talk about this in brevity, but this is where you get to take all of that information that you've learned through anatomy, kinesiology, biomechanics, and you get to apply that, right? Apply that to your clients towards their exercise programming to get them to their goals, because this is science. We know that it works. With these physiological adaptations, if you were to take a client who has not been engaging in a lot of exercise and wants to start working with you, you get them set up on a muscular training program, You also have cardio built in, but for today we're focusing on that muscular training. You start to exercise with them and you see that there's a spike in those muscle gains. That's pretty much immediate, right? Those are those acute responses. We see those responses in regards to the stress, that added variable that's been applied to the body. So you see more recruitment of muscle fibers. We see more coordination. We see more cooperation of these muscles because we're training the body to have to utilize that as that stress is implied. So we have our stress, we have those responses, but then once those responses advance, we see the adaptations. So we have these acute physiological adaptations that are quick. Long-term, we're starting to see that muscular strength and hypertrophy. And I feel it's important to bring up the principle of reversibility, although I'll talk about the principles just a little bit further along. But the principle of reversibility, essentially it's that idea of if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So it's very important to keep the body actively engaged in movement and muscular training. I'm a big proponent of getting the body, all the major muscle movers moving. That's a mouthful. So instead of just having your client on some type of an isotomic like press, let's say, or bicep rows, anything along those lines where they're just seated and they're only focusing on one specific area, let's get the body moving, right? Incorporate a lot of different motions. With that, if we don't use it, we lose it. So that principle of reversibility really is applicable when we're looking at these adaptations. When it comes to the muscular training component, what we're focusing on here are the muscles and the connective tissues in the body. Now, just as you heard if you tuned in about 3 weeks ago when Justin was talking about the cardiorespiratory training component of our ACE IFT, we start with the base. It's really important to start with the base in the muscular training component as well. With that, once you build a strong base, we'll be able to improve and increase into our strength. So when we're talking about muscular endurance, muscular strength, when we're talking about all of this, what's awesome is all of these different workouts that I designed are actually real world applicable. These were clients that I worked with outside. So that being said, I've changed their names, of course. But when we're going through each of these phases today, I want you to be able, if you choose to purchase this webinar afterwards, use these workbooks and be able to see, oh yes, Ezra was my one in foundational. That's who we're going to be working with. See how that person has evolved and what trainings, programs were designed for that person specifically. Or, we have Katrina in our movement phase, and then we have Eric in our load and speed. Right? We have these different clients that you're going to see in real-world applicable settings. So our 3 phases, functional, movement, and our load and speed. Functional is going to be where we're focusing more on that postural stability, right? We want a strong foundation, and that kinetic chain mobility. We'll talk about static and dynamic balance. With movement, we want to talk about that proper sequencing through our motions. And again, we'll iterate just a little bit more on the body's center of gravity, but that better control and range of motion. And that load and speed training phase. So we're taking those outside training variables, those external loads, and we're applying them to movement. Each is advancing into the next, and load and speed is where you start to see those muscular adaptations. So the functional phase. The functional phase, again, we would be referring to the client Ezra if you do choose to have those workouts afterwards. This training focuses on balance, core function, kinetic chain mobility, stability. This would be a program design where you are using primarily body weight or body segmented weight resistance, such as resistance bands. You're really focusing on that spine support, right? We need to build a strong foundation. We hear this all the time. We want, when you build a house, you don't pick out drapes first and curtains and such, right? Why would you do that? You want a foundation that's strong, that's going to uphold your house. That's your client's body. So you want to make sure that this foundation is strong. When building into this foundation of the functional phase, note any deviations with posture, flexibility, or balance. Commonly, we will see that we work with a lot of clients who are bent over all the time, right, typing on their computer, and they have that concave structure. We have to focus and build into this functional phase where we retract the scapula, we open up, we create that strong postural foundation. In this phase, also stabilize and support the lumbar spine so that we can progress into our distal segments. So functional training, we do talk about flexibility in this phase. We pay a lot of attention to it. As we know, flexibility decreases with age. Flexibility is very critical for our range of motion, our activities of daily living. It's very important that we work with our clients to ensure their flexibility is maximized on, right? That we're continuously working with them. In addition, static and dynamic stretching as well as balance is very important in this phase. I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to ballistic stretching, more of that jumping that we see sometimes with athletes, but we don't necessarily recommend this. There's not enough evidence out there. When it comes to static and dynamic stretching, this is your opportunity to be able to move with your clients if it's a passive or active stretch. Dynamic, a little bit of movement through that stretching technique, right? We utilize that oftentimes when we're teaching a cycling class and we come off. We don't want to instantly just stop and hold in a static stretch for 30 seconds. We want to keep those muscles moving just a little bit, right? That lengthening. So when I work through each of these evidence-based recommendations, this is from your PT text. There's a lot of information on here. Not enough for me to get in depth on every single one within the time that I'm here with you. That being said, I encourage you to refer back to them, have them in your back pocket, and utilize these because it's proven research. With this, the frequency when you're in that functional phase, about 2 to 3 days per week where you're incorporating this flexibility, this static and dynamic balance training. The time holding a static stretch will range from 10 to about 30 seconds. That's going to be different when we're talking about our proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, our PNF, or our dynamic. They're all going to differ just a little bit, and it's very relative to your client. Now, when it comes to progression in this functional phase, there's not enough out there that pertains to just one specific group because everyone's different. So some things that I like to suggest when you're taking someone through a functional phase, if you're working with their flexibility, continue to monitor how they are at a sit and reach test or a stand and reach. When you're with your clients, see how they progress week by week. Right, very, very important. And they'll notice this in their activities of daily living. When they're not even with you, they'll see the benefits. Now, movement training would be the next phase out of functional. With this one, you take that focus and it's that neuromotor, flexibility, and muscular conditioning. Now, in this phase, I will demonstrate just a couple of examples of this movement training, but this is primarily where you see a lot of people advance into, or typically they'll stay. With this, we do talk about the 5 primary functional movement patterns. When you're designing a program specific in this movement training phase, we want to focus on that dynamic work that you worked on in that functional phase and progress it, right? You want to be able to really note any deviations when it comes to form or technique. Injury can happen to anybody. Top-tier athlete, they can be doing some type of lifting movement and something can just be off balance, right? So you really want to be noting any deviations that you see. Older clients that you work with, any of your clients, make sure to look at their form and their technique at all times. With this, we have the 5 primary movement patterns. So you have the bend and lift, you have the single leg, you have pushing, you have pulling, rotational. We see these incorporated in everything that we do every single day, sometimes without even realizing it. So if you take all of these, they're all digging into different planes of motion with the body. We have those 3 planes. So if you do some type of an overhead press, that's going to be in that frontal plane. If you were to take somebody in a back squat, so bear with me because I do have jeans on. That being said, if you were to have a bar, because remember in this phase you can have added resistance. You can incorporate outside variables, right? So if you were to have their shoulders pulled back and you had a bar with your client, proper spotting of course, have them set up in that back squat stance, their lower body is engaging in that flexion. Their upper body is stabilized, right? Their lower body is doing more of the movement. The upper body is stabilized. So that's going to be in your sagittal plane. If you were to take somebody in some type of a rotational, oblique twist of any sort, that's going to be right into that transverse, right? So all of these primary movements, we see this every day. When we're doing laundry, when we bend, when we're cooking, when we do anything. So it's really important that we build strength in this because our clients are seeing it every day, every day. Now when we talk about designing a program, we'd want to advocate that about 2 to 3 times per week, the major muscle groups are being conditioned. So you'll often hear that Monday is our International Chest Day, right? We hear that quite often. But that doesn't mean that only Mondays you can work chest. No, come on, that means all the machines are filled, right? No, we don't want that. We want to advocate to our clients and build in different major muscle movements so that they're incorporating and really triggering those responses and those adaptations if they're in this phase. Now, when we talk about time, there's no specific duration in the movement phase. When you're working with a client, it's going to be relative. I've had clients that are 40 minutes. I've had them 60 minutes working in this training phase. I've had longer, some days a little bit shorter because they just need to get that movement in. So it's going to be very specific. Your job is to continue with that motivation, right? Keep them moving. Now, when it comes to the repetitions when you're in this range, you'll be able to see these on the workouts of the PDFs provided. We see 8 to 12 reps is great depending on their intensity. We sometimes see a little bit lighter weight. That could be anywhere between 8 and 15 reps. We also see all the way up to 25 as a program design. So it really depends on your client. With that, we want to see a gradual progression. We want to see with added intensity or added resistance that the body continues to adapt, grow, and change. Next will be the load and speed training phase. But I do want to note that when you're working with your clients, it's important to know your clients' exact goals, where they're at in these phases, and understand that you might have a client start in the functional phase, move into the movement phase, but that's good. That's where they want to be. That gets them to their training goals, and it's something that they can maintain. They might not need to move into that load and the speed phase. Or maybe you have a client who's already an avid athlete or exerciser. They start in that movement phase so you can assess those primary movers, and then they advance into that load and speed training phase. So you don't have to have a client that is always progressing into all three. With that, this training progresses that neuromotor, that flexibility, and the muscular conditioning a little bit more, right? That's why it's a phase. We typically, in this one, we see this is where a lot of those adaptations are taking place. So we see that increase in muscular endurance and strength. We see increase in hypertrophy, right? That muscle size. Overall, we see an improvement in body composition, performance, all around health. When you're designing the programs for your individuals in this phase, your clients should be able to exhibit good posture, good, strong foundation, strong kinetic chain mobility, and movement through these patterns. Be able to address any unfavorable outcomes with muscle strength, power when we're talking about speed, agility. So this could be something like accelerating or decelerating, right? You want to be able to note any of these outcomes so you can change, alter, progress them. With that, regularly assess these programs, right? It's really important to be able to facilitate and see the effectiveness of these programs that you're designing. Because this phase specifically is so dynamic, you can be incorporating drills. There's so many different things that you can do, but are they effective? You have to be able to continue to monitor this progress. With the load and speed assessments, as I had noted just a little bit with the acceleration and deceleration, clients must be able to accelerate their movement proficiency and control during the loading and against the reactive forces. So you're wanting to note things like their core function. When I'm working with my clients or in my classes, the core, this beautiful rectus abdominis that all of our bodies have, right? This is your powerhouse. We want to be able to utilize it, and we want to make sure it's really, really strong, right? Also with that, you want to make sure that you have strength and joint integrity. So something that I like to coach is we want to get the body warm when we start with our clients. Warm up that synovial fluid around the joints. It's important. In this phase, it's important to note that anaerobic efficiency without oxygen, big pushes, big intensity outbursts. Noting that athleticism. And also that there aren't any contraindications or medical concerns. I have had a client before in this phase, turned out she was pregnant, which was great. She was excited. That being said, over a certain amount of time, she could no longer keep in this phase, so she didn't digress back. She actually progressed back into that movement pattern as her body was changing. Her intensity levels were changing, and she just crushed it. She dominated. She's full force in that movement, moving through those prime movement patterns. Now, there's so many different drills that you can incorporate with your clients in the load speed training phase. One that I've shown today is more in regards to plyo box jumps. When I would do a lot of obstacle course racing, I loved plyo box jumps. I loved rock climbing. I loved doing all of these different things, as well as the clients that I worked with. It was kind of a specialized group there for a while. With that, plyo boxes that you'll see up on your screen, there's a whole variety of different jumping techniques and drills that you can integrate in a load and speed phase. The first one could be something like a jump rope. With that jump rope, you want to land simultaneous, right? You want both your left and your right foot to land at the same time. You want to develop that balance, that support. This is great for boxers when you're warming up, when you're training for boxing. Actually, jump rope can be utilized across a lot of different sectors when you're working with your clients. If you move down just a little bit further, those depth jumps and hops, that's going to be more of your plyo boxes. So if you take 24-inch plyo box, 36, 48, you're progressing, right? You have them do that intense bout of exercise. Which takes me into my next slide. That being that if you focus your eyes all the way down at that single or multi-level efforts, those big outputs, we see that we don't do necessarily as many repetitions because we're at such a high range of motion, right? For that one, that big outburst, 90% of your 1 rep max, right? So when I give this example, I don't go any higher than about 48 inches because, let's be honest, I'm 5'2" on a good day. That being said, it takes a lot of output. All those muscles are having to adapt at the same time to progress from one to the next, and so on. With that comes a little bit longer of a rest interval. So this all can be found in your PT text, and I encourage you to learn this because it's applicable in so many different types of scenarios. Now, if you have somebody in the load and speed training phase that is just working on their general muscular fitness, you might set up a program designed to be 1 to 4 sets, more repetitions, and that intensity is a wide range. Lower intensities potentially for your older adults, a little bit higher intensities for avid worker-outers, right? All right, so I talked about the principles just a little bit earlier in regards to the principle of reversibility. But I feel that the principles, maybe you've learned this back in your biomechanics courses or when you were reading through a lot of the text, but it's great to reiterate. So if we start with this muscular training exercise program design, we have different principles. The principle of specificity is that type of physiological demand, that outside force that is placed on the body, and it requires specific adaptations. The overload principle is an abnormal amount of stress or force applied to the body or that muscular group that elicits some type of an enhanced training response. Now, I feel that overload and progression, these two principles go hand in hand, but when we're talking about the overload principle, if you were to have a client, they've been exercising from their home in quarantine, right, for so long. They have a 10-pound set of weights at home and they love those 10-pound weights. If that client has been, let's say, regularly exercising with these weights for the past 3 to 6 months, that's a long duration, but only those weights. They continue, let's say, with a bicep curl. They can do 15 reps, they can do 6 sets every single time, and they crush it. But the moment you give them a 20-pound weight, this changes. This changes because they've been overloaded, and they can't perform that high of reps, or maybe at that intensity level. So when we talk about the progression going hand in hand with overload, we want to continue to see gains as we add more intensities or resistance onto the body. The body will adapt, it will respond. Reversibility, I'm not going to talk too much about. If you don't use it, you lose it. We already talked about that. But another one that's not up on your screen is a principle of diminishing returns. We do see this often with muscular training, is that you do have clients sometimes that will reach a peak performance. That peak performance means that they can no longer continue to see gains, right? They don't continue to get this feedback. And this is often a time when overtraining, overuse, people become bored. We see plateaus happen in this state. So it's important for you as the exercise professional to be able to work with your clients and help them out of this diminishing return phase. Periodization, all of this intertwines with one another. So when you're designing this exercise program with the ACE IFT, periodization is very important to pay attention to. It's going to be our timeline and how we apply that intensity. So if we break down our periodization, you have your macro cycle. Your macro cycle is your overall time frame. Now, if you want to go into the quadrillium, that's longer durations of, well-sustained exercise program, you're looking at years. But for today, I want to focus on your macro cycle being your program timeline, because it is. And it's going to be broken down into your mesocycles, which are more your mid-length in duration, and your microcycles. Those are going to be more progressive training segments for each different mesocycle that you build up into. So with our macro cycle, I program clients 8 weeks. 16 weeks was very common when I was powerlifting. We've seen program design 6 months, 12 months. If I use the example of powerlifting, let's say it was 16-week program design, those mesocycles we were trying to build up in bench, dead, and squats into about week 8 to 10 to see where we were at, to see in terms were we going to get to that overall competition ready within 16 weeks. So then we had those microcycles that had to be programmed specifically to build the meso into the macro. When we talk about periodization, we have two different types. We have our linear and our undulating. Linear is more applicable to overall our exercise clients. And we can start our beginners here. Most often we find most of our training programs designed in this area, but undulating has a lot of returns as well. So if we talk about linear progression, let me provide an example. If you have a notepad, I encourage you to write this down and play with it, right? Think about this. So if I were to take linear periodization, I want to break it down into 3 weeks. Week 1, I would set my 3, I'll just use common bench, squat, and dead. I'd want to set it up something like a 3x8 each week, or for week 1, at a 65% intensity. But week 2, I've designed it where it's a 3x6. So I have 3 sets. I'm going through 6 repetitions for each set at an intensity level of about 72%. And week 3, I go through 3 sets at 4 repetitions at about 80% intensity. So you can compare this to that graph on your screen. As the volume decreases and our intensity increases, we start to see this linear pattern where our muscles are adapting, they're building, that strength is all coming together. The other option of periodization is undulating. I personally like working with this one because I like the change. What we see in the undulating is that it's non-linear. Typically, we see this type of a cycle in about a 7 to 10 day approach, and we see that the variables, volume, intensity, those are changing. So this gets a little confusing, but if I were to break it down into 3 days, day 1, again, bench, squat, and deads. I have it set up where it's a 2x8 at about 65% intensity. Day 2, deadlifts are going to take a break. I have my bench and my squats. My bench I've designed at a 3x6, and my squats at a 2x6 at about a 72% intensity. Day 3, this time my squats take a break, deadlifts come back in, bench is still there. I set up my bench at 3x3, and my deadlifts I set up at a 2x6 at an 80% intensity, right? So these variables are changing and it's causing these muscular adaptations. So it depends on your client. We do see undulating more sports specific with our athletes, but they can be applied to anyone depending on what their goals are. Now when it comes to program maintenance, let's be realistic. We have life happen, right? We have illnesses. We had a pandemic. We still have a pandemic. We have family vacations, holidays, things that are sometimes seen as curveballs, but it's life. And it's good to recognize, especially you as the client, you as the personal trainer working with your client, to be able to say, this is okay, and be able to plan for that, right? You want to keep your clients with you. You want to retain them. I encourage you to encourage your clients to maintain a minimum level of physical activity, even during these, weeks off, or if things happen that are maybe outside of that regular control. Incorporate high-intensity interval training at least 12 minutes a week. 12 minutes, right? We think about all the time we spend in recovery. they can give 12 minutes, right? Integrate long session trainings. This is going to be relative to your clients. Could be 40 minutes, could be 90 minutes. That's up to you and the client to work together. And then combine cardio and your muscular training together, right? They go hand in hand. This IFT model, it's proven. They have to incorporate both to see those successes. Now, when we talk about recovery is super important. It took a pandemic for me to understand recovery and the benefits of sleep, and I can wholeheartedly say that it's amazing, right? It's really empowering to let the body recover. And then we do see more muscular adaptations because of this. And when I talk about, proper form and technique, I tore my rectus abdominis on the right side while deadlifting. I teach exercise. I know how to do a proper deadlift. And yet, all circumstances aside, I tore that muscle, of which it's still torn, and who knows what that's going to turn into. But it's really important to let the body recover, let the body heal. And just like you saw with our different adaptations when we're designing exercise or those exercise recommendations, we set it up using the FIT VP. With that, we see our frequency, volume progression, and so on. But the FIT principle can also be applied when training, yes, training recovery. So your frequency would be overall days per week. How often are you recovering? 1 to 2 days? Also with microcycles, do you take a break off because you're traveling on vacation? Potentially. With that, also intensity and time. The intensity can vary between bouts as well as the time of recovery between bouts. That being said, remember when I talked about those plyo box jumps? With that, we saw that an athlete performing at 80 to 90% of their all-out intensity needed a little more time to recover. So that time was increased 2 to 5 minutes, where it might not have been for somebody not working at such a high intensity level. So it's really important to be able to systematically design these exercise programs. And then the type, active or passive. We also have recovery modes. Cycling is a great one, but passive or active, here we like to advocate more active recovery. That would be something like taking a walk, right? I mean, work breaks. If you have been at your computer all day today, I want you to take a walk break, get some fresh air. Meditate. These would be forms of active recovery and very important to overall see us get to that better quality of life. With this, anyone can follow an online strength program. We have so many YouTubers out there, fitness influencers. Their programs are all over social media, all over the internet. It's almost like a one-size-fits-all. That personally doesn't vibe with me, right? With that, it's important that you work with these clients. Use that ACE mover method. Use that, that's essentially, right, the key that unlocks that mutual trust between the personal trainer and the client so that you can ultimately help them seek out a better quality of life, right? Longevity, being able to perform those activities of daily living with more ease. So they need you. They need you to work with them, right? Whether it's virtual or in person, you is incredibly important. And that's why you're here today, because you're putting so much time towards your education. So with all of this, in summary, personal trainers can utilize the ACE IFT model to provide their clients with evidence-based exercise programming. We have founded so much research on these models and their effectiveness. Designing these programs have to be specific to each and every client that you work with. Personal trainers should safely move a client from one phase into the next, working with functional, into movement, into that load and speed, if it's necessary for that client and what their goals are. The muscular training component, when applied long-term, will benefit these clients who have goals in this area. It's no question. And that real-world application, having you work with these clients, applying it in that real-world setting, activities of daily living, the benefits of muscular training, I mean, there's just so many, so many. With that, I could not be more thankful to be here with you all today, wherever you're at in the world. It has been an absolute pleasure. I hope that you continue utilizing all of these resources in everything that we've built. This is a lot of information to take in 1 hour. So please feel free to continue learning with that education and all that we have to offer within the American Council on Exercise. And I hope that you and your clients continue to move. Jackie, we're going to put it back to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Great job. That was a lot of information. Thank you all for hanging out with us and watching today for free. Once again, we will be taking some questions here with our presenter momentarily. So go ahead and type in your question for our presenter right now in your YouTube chat bar, and we'll take those questions here shortly. On your screen right now, you can also see Michelle's contact information. If you would like to stay in touch with her and continue the conversation, we will also be sending Michelle over to the ACE Fitness Facebook page after today's presentation has concluded so that she can continue the conversation with you there. As a reminder, if you are interested in this topic of muscular training and furthering your education with the American Council on Exercise, we have a variety of courses to choose from. On your screen right now, you can see 2 of our bundles that go into further detail about the ACE IFT model and using it with a variety of clients. So take a look at those. And remember that you are required to earn CECs, that's 20 hours, 2.0 CECs, to continue maintaining your certification with ACE. And we have an option for you if you'd like to join the CEC Club to do that for a low price. And you can find out more information about the CEC Club at acefitness.org. Okay, so let's take a few live questions here with our presenter, Michelle. Michelle, once again, thank you so much. Great job. And there is a lot to cover here within the muscular training component. We can do courses, and hopefully we'll do more courses on this topic and kind of break things down into further detail. But let's talk a little bit about progressing through those phases that you talked about, right? We have our 3 phases: function, movement, and then the load speed phase. So regardless of the clients that we're working with, what are some of the things that we need to look for and understand about how to and when to progress a client from one phase to another and or back through the phases? As you mentioned, you had a client that was pregnant and needed to move into the movement training phase and do some other different types of training. So let's talk about when we need to do that with our clients.
Perfect. That's a great question. So when it's important to move your clients through phases or possibly back in phases, typically how we would recommend this would be, it's your job to be with that client all the time, right? Not all the time, you're not going home with them, but when you are with them, that time is theirs, right? It's very important to be watching how they progress. So in regards to this question, something that we would advocate would be when you're noting deviations, when you're taking note of any unfavorable outcomes that might be happening with your client, that is your time. You've developed this rapport and this trust with your client. Take a pause, right? Take a moment, come back to where you maybe work through that form and technique a little bit better, because injuries can happen at any time. With that in mind, your clients likely adore you and trust you. Right? That's definitely part of the mutual trust aspect when we're listening to our clients. So when you do coach your clients to, let's take a second, let's refocus on this form, this technique. Maybe we need to focus on that, how you load the body with your weight, how we move through any of the primary movements. When you're noting those deviations, that would be a great time to say, all right, let's just take a step back. Does that mean you have to go all the way back into the functional phase if you have a client in your movement phase at that time? Absolutely not. You can focus maybe some on that postural stabilizing or different movements of the kinetic chain while also keeping them in that movement phase to make them stronger in that movement phase. Now, when it comes to going back potentially in a phase, this would be, again, I brought up the example of when I was working with someone who had become pregnant. With that, it wasn't beneficial, nor did it meet her goals to move back into the phase where it didn't benefit her to stay in that load and speed phase, right? She didn't need to do drills anymore, but she loves exercising and she really wanted to keep up with her strength. So we moved her back into movement, and she loved that because she was still getting to strengthen her body. We talked about how strong that rectus abdominis is. That's important for childbirth. And so she was outstanding, but she knew the benefits of this phase. And so between that mutual trust and communication, we collaborated together to be able to still make her feel very empowered in that movement phase, but bring her back from these drills into that phase. So I would really advocate continuing to work with your clients, use that ACE mover method. Ask these questions continuously, leave them open-ended, have that conversational piece, and see where they feel comfortable. But at the same time, your job as an exercise professional. And with that being said, know when they might be doing harm to their body and know when to refocus on their form and technique.
Great. So there is a lot to consider there, right? And as you mentioned before, exercise, as we know, is not a one-size-fits-all, right? We can't tell everyone that they have to be in the functional phase for 4 weeks. Everybody is 4 weeks, right? It doesn't work that way. So your point about using the ACE IFT model, talking to your clients, watching them as they're moving, understanding if they are still having some deviations and compensations in their movement patterns to understand when they're ready to progress. So
absolutely,
great job keeping an eye on your clients and really understanding kind of where they're at and how they're feeling is important. So you touched on something else, and I'm going to continue with our live questions here. Thank you all for typing those in. Around working with clients who maybe have weight loss goals, but are very interested in progressing their movement patterns and maybe do want to see themselves doing some of the movements and the drills that you talked about in the load speed phase. Is that an appropriate place for somebody that's working to lose weight if that's their primary goal? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So as I had noted when we were talking about some of these adaptations and the physiological benefits that we see with muscular training, we see that the metabolism will enhance over time, right? So we see that when we take our clients through this exercise programming of muscular training, that ideally inside their body what's happening is they are developing more muscular mass. With that, we'll add in decreased fat mass. So I would not advocate when you work with the client, let's say it's the first week or even the first month that you're working with this client who has a main goal of weight loss, but also really likes the idea of some drills. Maybe it was something that they had former in their pastime that they enjoyed doing. That being said, I would focus on going through foundation and movement to really make sure that they're strong in the body that they have, right? And then educate them and work that they will get to that point and maybe start them incorporating some slower drills that you would see in a load speed phase, but incorporate them into that functional or movement. It's not a one-size-fits-all. We know that with exercise, and that's also applicable with these phases. So you could incorporate a slower use of maybe a ladder drill. That would be great where they're still incorporating a lot of those prime movements, still focusing on muscular training, but also getting the fun of a few drills thrown in there.
Yeah, great. So as you mentioned, we've got to kind of keep that conversation open with our clients and maybe throwing a little bit of those treats at them that they would enjoy from the load speed phase and helping them to feel confident and do things that they're enjoying, because as we know with weight loss, consistency is key. So having them have an enjoyable exercise experience is also really big part of that, right?
Absolutely. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle.
Great. Yes. Okay, so we have just time for one more live question. So thanks for hanging out with us. And remember, you can continue the conversation with our presenter, Michelle Leachman, by going to the ACE Fitness Facebook page after today's presentation is over. But just a little bit more about some of the assessments. And you talked a little bit about this. This isn't a webinar on assessments in particular, but there are assessments that we need to be doing with our clients. Do we only do assessments in the functional phase when somebody's kind of just starting out and working with us there, or do we want to keep doing them as they keep progressing through the IFT model?
That is a great question. Absolutely. So with our assessments, we should always, when we're getting to know our clients and throughout their training, assess where they're at with their progress, where their current state is, where they want to go. So that's a great question. No, we don't want to only assess clients that are just starting in a functional phase. We would want to assess them no matter, we have to assess them to know what type of phase they will be best suited in at that time. And just because you go through their lifestyle evaluation, you take them through a series of assessments, doesn't mean that you immediately can put them in that movement phase and that they're going to maximize there. That might not be the best fit. So when you're taking them through assessments, I would encourage continuously assessing to maximize on that training effectiveness, to know that what you are designing for them and what they are following really adheres to where they're going with their goals. And overall, we're looking for better quality of life, right? Better movement through these activities of daily living. So continuously assessing, and have them assess themselves too, right? It's no problem to have them go back and say, you know, I think I could work on this a little bit better or do this a little differently.
Great, and that's a great point about having them assess themselves. It's important for us, as you mentioned with the mover method and kind of creating that rapport with clients, allowing them to see how far they've come in their exercise programming can do a lot for that motivation and building rapport with you. Sometimes it feels like, I'm stuck or I'm reached a plateau, but really helping them along the way with some continuous assessments can be a big part of moving them towards those goals. So thank you, Michelle, for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us today. Remember, you can continue the conversation with Michelle by going to the ACE Fitness Facebook page right now and type in your question for our presenter if you'd like to continue the conversation with her. Remember that you are required to earn continuing education credits as a part of your certification with ACE. So if you would like to earn CECs for today's course, you can do that by using the information on your slide now, using the link that's acefitness.org/past webinars. You will also receive a follow-up email from ACE about how to purchase today's course, which, a reminder, it will come with a video, the recorded video of today's course, along with a quiz and 3 downloadable PDFs, which Michelle mentioned throughout today's presentation. And those PDFs are in alignment with the 3 phases of the IFT model. So hopefully those are a great addition to your training program with your clients. And remember that we have another live webinar coming up next week. It's already April, so join us next week for another live webinar with ACE's own Lauren Schroyer. She is the Senior Director of the Product Development Department here at ACE, and she's going to be talking about digital fitness and the fitness technology revolution. So a great topic to have in your back pocket right now as we're going through some shifts in the fitness industry. So hopefully you can join us for that. Remember to stay in touch with ACE in a variety of ways. Let us know what you thought about today's live webinar. And right now, in your YouTube chat bar, right now, go ahead and type in other topics that you would like to learn more about from ACE. Use that YouTube chat bar and let us know what else you'd like to learn. Michelle, once again, thank you for joining us. It was great to have you.
It was such a blast. Thank you.
Thank you all for hanging out with us today. Now, let's get people moving.